if you took 1.6 million and you invested it in something that's going to generate 8% a year, that's $10,000 a month. And so it's not huge, but you can see how it can start growing, let alone the ability to take, $1 million and be able to double it in 3 to 5 years in something that you have a high level of confidence in. Welcome back to the Investor Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pesavento, and today we've got Chad Price in the studio. How you doing today, Chad?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I think you've got an interesting story. You've built some businesses, you exited them, kind of at another chapter of your life. So we'll absolutely talk about that and what role investing has played in that. Before we get into all that, let's start by looking way back. What events or influences from your childhood shaped who you are today?
I mean, if I try to, pinpoint it to like one event or one actual experience, I don't think I could have one. It probably would be sports, give me the best reference points for just putting me in so many situations that I had to overcome, whether that was athletically, emotionally, creating a team, teamwork, branding. There's so many things I think you can learn from the world of sports. So I try to encourage people to utilize whatever experiences you've had growing up to, help you be a better business person. But for me, I think sports is probably the number one thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. You're in an environment, there's competition, there's challenges. You're going to lose, you're going to have to grow, and you're going to have to do that with a team.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I tell people all the time, the first time I understood what branding was I had a new coach come to my high school when I was a sophomore, and he completely changed not just the culture of the team, but also how the community saw the team. So it was a night and day difference between, how the business of the school and the athletic program worked after he came versus before he came. And I always, for me, that was one of the sparks where I could see like, okay, it's bigger than just the words you say and the people you hire. You have to have a kind of a consistent brand and really try to think about how you can build a community around whatever concept your product you're trying to serve people.
Yeah, it's kind of like whatever it is, people have to be able to understand that vision, understand the outcome. They have to understand what it means, what the emotions are behind it. And that actually in itself is a brand and it drives people forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this is, pre-internet, giving my age away, before people are really even worried about social media and social businesses in general. There were no online communities when I was in high school. So seeing someone be able to do that kind of on the ground helped me understand like, hey, whenever I start a company, that's the kind of culture that I want to be behind it. That's the kind of support I need to build in whatever kind of space I'm trying to take over. And I've taken that with me in my business or in my business ventures.
Yeah. I think there's a huge takeaway. So I know you've built some businesses and you exited a business recently. I want to talk about that process of exiting. The process of actually getting your business ready to sell, doing a merger, an acquisition, and what you took away from that. So what led you to the point of deciding, hey, it's time for me to sell this business?
I think, when you're in business, some people have the fortunate wisdom or vision to be able to know like, hey, I'm going to, build this and sell it in 3 years. And then, I think there's other people or most people like myself that you're trying to make everything work as much as you can. And if the opportunity presents itself, or if you get to a certain stage or milestone, you take these considerations. And I think it was more like that for us, where we realized, we had built something that was really big. The community had a huge support. But in order to get it to what we consider the next level, it's going to take serious investment. It's a heavy inventory-based business. There are significant factors to international expansion that you have to take into consideration. So if we really wanted to kind of do that in one swoop and really see, some benefits in our lifetime, that would take us bringing on a partner or going through some type of merger or acquisition where we could have better financing for that situation. And that's ultimately what we decided to do.
Yeah, it's one of the things a lot of people overlook when getting into business is, there's different pros and cons with being in businesses that have, few assets versus, something like your business where you had, essentially you were selling fitness equipment and you had to have that inventory on hand, and therefore you have to actually spend that money well in advance of being able to turn through and sell that product, which just means it's going to create and require a lot more capital to be able to do. What did you take away that you would do different if you were going to start another business, knowing the knowledge you have? Obviously, you have the advantage of that experience, but what would lead you, or what takeaways did you have from that?
Well, I mean, I started a business fortunately with, a couple college buddies. So I was able to, lean on our personal relationships a lot more than I think most people are in their business partner of choice. But if I had to change something different, it would be trying to get through to everyone earlier that we need to take on investment. I think we talked about it year 2, year 3, but then, another year goes by and you're just trying to make everything work. You end up putting out a lot of fires for a couple of years before you realize, like, if we're really going to do this, there's no kind of getting around this choice. The choice needs to be made. So bringing on some type of financing at a stage where we've kind of proven that concept would probably be the number one takeaway.
Yeah. It's interesting because capital is fuel to be able to grow the business, to be able to hire people, to be able to market, to be able to bring in new inventory. And yet it is also, especially when you're starting a business, it's kind of a scary thought. Where do I get it? How do I get it? How do I show these investors or these partners that I have something that's worth investing in, and how much am I going to give away in the process of that, and what am I going to gain as a result? So for you in this business in particular, let's talk a little numbers. What was the business earning, and what did the margin look like in that business before you let it go?
So we were, I think, around 6 million, but I think we were, if you were looking at what we should have been doing, 10, 12 million annually. But that's going to be limited by inventory. So every single year, if you're talking about your margins, let's just say average 30%, you can only really grow by that much without bringing on capital. And that's kind of how we were forever. And I think, you kind of mentioned you get into this phase of just trying to make everything work. And you also build up a sense of stubbornness to where making it work is what has gotten you here. And that's not necessarily what needs to be the next decision for the next level. And I think I see a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, go through trying to figure out, when do you make that decision? I definitely think we waited too long to make that decision, but I learned a lot going through that process as well. So, it's an expensive lesson, but I think it's also something that when you have done something without the help of financing, it gives you a certain perspective. And when you've taken on financing too early, maybe it gives you a different perspective. So I think it's a balance that everyone has to kind of play, and you have to pick your spot on when you're going to do it, but it's inevitability in business.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. It's like you don't want to take it on too early when you don't have confidence that money is going to go to work and be able to create the kind of returns necessary. And yet, being limited, businesses that are larger sell for higher multiples because the buyers typically have more confidence in the ability to grow, and they're writing a larger check. And so those investors typically can pay a higher valuation. What did a company like this, or what's the range of valuation in this space, or what did you receive?
So, out of respect for my partners, I usually say, it was a multi-million-dollar deal, so if you're talking about, people are getting like 4 to 6 multiples on e-commerce brands during that time period. So, it's a deal that's in that ballpark, but, I think it's more.
It's a great return.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was a 10-year journey to get to that point. For the first 5 years of the business, we didn't pay ourselves anything. So, I don't recommend that to anyone. That's a hard grind. Luckily for me, I had, more than one business, so I was able to lean on some of my other businesses during that time period. But either way, taking on financing earlier, figuring out how we were going to actually blow this thing out once we got it to certain milestones, that's something that, I think we all look back on and say we should have done sooner. We believe that, we could have gotten, this could have been a $100 million deal had we taken on financing 4 or 5 years earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a really great lesson, and it's one that you, without a doubt, will be able to apply into your next business or the next iteration. So obviously you spent a decade building that business. You were, living off of the income off of other businesses. Maybe you took some distributions. You had a $5 to $10 million exit. You are now in a position where you no longer have that business, but you got to see kind of the end road. When it comes to the process of selling a business, what were some of the lessons that you took away that lead to the valuation or the value of the business that now you could or would apply in future businesses to be able to maximize for that exit?
Well, I mean, I think when you're trying to get any business ready for exit, you don't necessarily know all the things that you need to do. I think it took us, I tell everybody, it was like getting a PhD in my own business during that time period, just getting everything prepared for someone else to evaluate, and having every answer that they might ask you a question about, trying to figure out any gaps in the presentations or just how you were going to position the business. So in doing that in itself, I think was a good exercise for us to really see the value of the business. And I wish we'd have done that a little bit sooner. So, I would encourage people, if you are even thinking about selling a business, getting your books in order and getting structuring the business in a way that makes it look appetizing to a potential owner or a new investor is the best way to do it. Things like not paying ourselves didn't work in our favor when we were trying to sell the business. So things had to be restructured, and we had to do things in order to make the business a favorable investment versus just doing whatever we had to do to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you're running a business and you're just doing everything you need to do in order to maximize cash flow on the business or whatever that metric is for you, you often don't realize that what somebody's looking for as an investor who's buying a business is often slightly different, right? And so that process of selling a business can often, if optimized, can take up to 2 years, where you're planning in advance, you're getting that growth happening, so you can sell it at a higher multiple. And those things can really pay off. And so you invested heavily, a decade of your life building this business. You had a great exit. How did it feel to sell that business and know that your time with that company had come to a close?
I think anytime you transition from one thing that means something means a lot to you to another, it's a big deal. So I equate it to like graduating from college. Stop playing football, things like that in my life, where you kind of know this part of it this chapter's come to an end and you're moving on to the next one. But I get excited about that just as much as anything. So I look forward to the challenge to come more than anything. When I think about everything that I've experienced thus far, I'm only really ever doing that to get ready for harder challenges or for bigger and better things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So we talked about business. Let's talk about kind of the investing side. Other than investing time, effort, energy, capital into this business, what other types of investments have you made? You mentioned you run a couple different businesses. You invested in private equity and real estate in the market. What's been your strategy for growing wealth or income outside of that primary focus business?
So, I think people like myself, sometimes even struggle with looking at investments from the correct perspective. I know I consider myself in that category. Most of my other investments are going to be other businesses. That's usually how, my mind thinks, is if I diversify my business ventures, then I'll have multiple streams of income. If one lacks off, I can lean on the others. And that's usually how I've tried to run it, is always trying to keep a portfolio of, 3 to 4 businesses that I'm running at once. And some of those are because of necessity and I need to, create cash. And then others are more of brand building, really trying to build something that I think can have, let's say, a global impact or some type of long-term value. So I look at it as kind of juggling those two things is my main investment strategy right now.
Yeah, I think that could be a great strategy because the benefit is you're taking your skills and time and you're applying that to a business that you understand, and you can create a stream of income off of it. And if you can have confidence that it's going to come, that can be great. with also the idea that, you know, if you could structure those businesses right, you might be able to exit it at a 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 multiple, depending on the strategy, which then opens up another perspective where it's like, well, where would I put money if I had it? And so I think it's really valuable for people in your shoes to start understanding where that money could go, because I think somebody like yourself, you had an exit, you understand this particular niche of a business. There's probably an opportunity for you to make small or large investments in businesses that are in a very similar field, where you can bring your skills and expertise alongside some capital to help another company grow. Or, you know, being able to look at things like real estate or private funds or private credit, other strategies that you can get your money working for you. Because, for example, if you took 1.6 million and you invested it in something that's going to generate 8% a year, you know, that's $10,000 a month. And so it's not huge, but you can see how it can start growing, let alone the ability to take, you know, $1 million and be able to double it in 3 to 5 years in something that you have a high level of confidence in. So what's kind of held you back from looking at other investment strategies and, you know, just staying focused on the business side?
I mean, I think, you know, it's one of those things that's just, it's hard for me to see the world through that perspective of an investor. You know, it's like a different perspective for me. It's almost like, I try to explain this because my dad and I talk about this quite a bit. And my dad is a much more, let's say, conservative spender or conservative risk taker than I am when it comes to entrepreneurship, money, things like that. But, you know, it's almost like you keep thinking that you have unlimited chances, you have unlimited lives, you know, you will continue to go out and make it the next day. And it's only at points, I think, that you come to like an acquisition where you realize like, hey, maybe I need to have an investment strategy alongside this. And that's something that over the past couple of years, I have definitely been working on. But up until the exit, you know, my investment strategy was new businesses that I was involved in. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. And it's a great place to be, actually, because you know how to run a business, so you can always fall back on that. But now that you've exited, I think one of the biggest things that you can learn for future exits, and you probably did in this process, I'd love to hear what you maybe did learn on this side, but is that tax side of the equation. That's what's really interesting about investments, is some of them actually will allow you to reduce taxes. So was there any strategies that you found? Of course, none of this is legal or tax advice, but was there any strategies you found when exiting the business that kind of helped support you keeping more of that money rather than, you know, passing it along to Uncle Sam?
I mean, yes, because like you talked about, you know, it can take you 2 years to kind of get things ready for an investor or for a new ownership group to take over. We had time to kind of get our personal lives and personal books in order for that type of exit. And so the investments that I would make would be taken into consideration that I probably will get a lump sum of cash, you know, at the end of next year or sometime next year. And so I was able to make some investments in my other businesses, small real estate investments, things like that, because I knew I had that future coming where I was going to be able to basically write off some of the losses or decrease my overall gains by doing that ahead of time. But, you know, it's a fine balance as well. I didn't go out and like take a significant loan and put myself in a, you know, overextended to do that either. So, you know, I definitely don't think, you know, I've nailed the exit strategy. I think, you know, one of the things I think I have nailed is kind of building online communities around whatever product or service or niche you're trying to take over. But the investment of after the acquisition, that's literally something that I'm super interested in right now. And, you know, I'm trying to even think about how I could have better prepared myself. That's some of the stuff I reflect on in the book. Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest things that I just want to underline for the listeners is, you know, exactly where you are, Chad, is where so many other people have been. And that the idea that you exit the business and then it's kind of like, what's next? And what's the tax strategy? How could I have structured the business in a way that I would pay no taxes or little taxes that are completely legal and actually encouraged? But the crazy thing is so much of this stuff is hidden. It's kind of like until you need it and you happen to connect with somebody who has used it, it is difficult to even know about what some of those strategies are. So happy to talk about that sometime. But what I'm really curious about is you exited the business. Obviously, business has been kind of your key focus area. And then you've really stepped out into an opportunity where you can share some of those lessons. I know you wrote a book, and I know you're working on a new book. So talk to me a little bit about what pushed you down that path to take the time to share the lessons from your journey with other people.
Well, I've always kind of had to be the, let's say the spokesperson for the companies that I've been involved with. So speaking and kind of painting the picture of the company, the brand vision, the journey has always kind of been my purview. When I finally got to the point where we had a decade and we had an acquisition, I realized, this is a kind of a great end of one chapter, beginning of the next. And I wanted to culminate that in a book. And that just kept leading to kind of more opportunities like that. I went to Rice University in Houston, so I mentor kids there for whether it's athletics or entrepreneurship. So I'm kind of helping, whether it's through, lifestyle and business choices and career choices, but then also helping, young entrepreneurs see the world through the lens of what's actually happening on the business playing field versus, what you're learning in a school or reading in books. I think there's a big gap, and I was able to kind of identify that really early on when I was in college and when I was trying to be formally educated as a business professional. I tell people all the time, I never read a book about social media ever because I was the first person with a Facebook page in my school. So there was no marketing lesson for some of the things like that. And, that's just one reference point. That's not everything in business. But I think trying to figure out how to take your idea to a point where it can become a global brand is an area that I've had a lot of expertise in, and giving that back is, it comes naturally for me. And it's something that I've seen it's a lot of need for young entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really good that you're able to spend some time kind of delivering that impact, because I'm curious to hear your perspective, but my perspective is the education system is broken. People go to school, they go to college, they go get a job. And I wouldn't say that from my experience or a lot of people that I know that it necessarily sets you up well to be able to go do the activities that you need to do. You end up learning a lot of that stuff on the job, and learning how to learn is part of the program. But as an entrepreneur, so much of it is so far outside of the textbook. So what is your perspective on the education system, and how are you helping other people kind of see outside of that?
Well, I think it's better. It's getting kind of closer and closer to reality as we integrate technology with the education system. But, if you can imagine, when I was in college, people were still like, you don't use a computer or don't use a calculator to do a math problem. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why am I doing math by pen and paper like this? There's better uses of my time than just sitting here and wasting this. And I think integrating what actually happens in reality to education has always been a problem, right? Like, it's always been like people, those who can't do it teach. Right now, I think is one of the first times that you actually have kids, especially athletic kids and things like that, where basically your business world starts when you go to college. If you talk about like NIL athletes, even young entrepreneurs are now kind of starting at that 18-year-old age, where that wasn't even really possible 40 years ago, 30 years ago. So there weren't books written about, some teenager becoming famous. And now I think just trying to put that into perspective for people is what I'm trying to do is, I teach a workshop, like how to apply sports concepts on the business playing field, for example. And that's literally just to try to get you to understand, okay, there's lessons that you've learned, but now you're entering a new playing field. And to understand that, you kind of have to put yourself into this new game. There is no kind of preparatory course for the current playing field. TikTok could be banned tomorrow, and everyone who has a TikTok strategy is now going to have to shift. So I think that's more of the mindset that I try to teach, is how do you get in the correct mindset to see the playing field for as it is now.
Yeah, so that you can be adaptable to whatever strategy it is that's needed or useful at that time. Kind of like Facebook ads were incredibly powerful, and then Apple changed the algorithm, and then that really hurt things. And now Facebook is back, but it's more expensive. And you got to be able to adapt, because what worked yesterday will eventually not work, because everyone will find out about it, and it's time to move on to the next strategy.
Yeah. And I try to, to me, education is almost like if you can build enough resources that you're able to run a lot of tests, then that's the best education you can have, because you're not really educating yourself more than you're just testing over and over and over, and you're testing different strategies. So as you become better at making business decisions, you're checking off things that doesn't go well as at the same time. So my 10 years of experience is not me making all the right decisions. It's a lot of bad decisions in there. It's a lot of wasted ads and a lot of went down the wrong path here. Let's turn around and go back. But you create enough cash flow to be able to do that. So it's a strategic approach. And that's what I try to teach people is, if you can take the mindset of tackling problems that way and tackling the business world that way, it becomes a lot easier than thinking what I'm reading right now is going to make me a millionaire. I don't think that ever really happens, or at least it doesn't happen in my experience.
Yeah. When it comes to building community, that's something you were really effective at. It was probably one of the core pillars of your business, building this online community and then having the ability to sell that community product, services that they wanted and needed. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of those core tenets of building community. The reason I ask for context is I think community is one of the most things that are missing in today's society. We're so much more focused on individualism, and yet there's such a drive and a draw of people wanting to connect online, in person, and be surrounded by people who are like-minded and grow together. So I think regardless of what industry it is, it's applicable, and it's especially applicable to investors who want to, change the game and get around other people.
Yeah, I think for us, it kind of starts with sports, like I say, in having kind of a pure mission. I think once you find what that pure mission is, it's hard for people to get in the way of that. It's hard to be right or wrong about being healthy and exercising. That's a good thing for everyone. If you don't want to be healthy and exercise, then this isn't for you, and we're okay with that. And when you have a community that's based around missions like that, I think it makes it very easy. If my community was, how do I get more people to smoke cigarettes? It would be, a much more difficult community for me. I think it can still be done, but it would be, much more difficult for me to achieve that. So my background in sports and athletics definitely is something that I think about when I'm building a community. It's building a team. It's inclusive. It's trying to bring everybody away from whatever issues and problems they're having outside of this mission, and really focus on this mission for at least the time period we're here. I used to be very good and, have coaches that would train us to leave everything outside of the field, practice while you practice, you deal with that after you get done with practice type of deal. And I think taking that mindset and trying to put that into your user experience, where when you're here, you're getting a positive, really pure experience for whatever we're trying to pitch to you. So before, people were really into, let's say, giving away a lot of free things and building online communities. We were doing that, from the beginning of the company. We were giving away free workouts before we'd ever try to sell you a single thing. You might get free workouts for 6 months before you'd ever get pitched a single product. And I think when people see stuff like that, I don't have to argue about whether I'm on a positive mission or whether I'm trying to achieve something that's positive for a community of people. It's the proof is in the pudding, and now you get to either choose to be a part of something positive, or you can watch us be positive over here, and eventually you'll choose to be part of the positive experience. And that's what I try to do. Yeah.
And for context, Living Fit, online fitness community, you were selling those products, but really where it started was, how much value can I give to build this relationship with people that all have a similar mindset, mission, drive, and how can I bring them together into a space, in this case online, that they could continue to interact and build that relationship.
Yep, and it was both Kettlebell Kings and Living Fit. So yeah, I sold both of those companies, two separate sales. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is really powerful. Chad, I know you just launched a new podcast. I know you got a book that you're working on and one that's already out available for folks. I've got one more question for you. But before we get to that last question, why don't you share with people where they can check out the new show or get a copy of your book?
You can find out everything about me at chadprice.com. It's probably the number one hub to start. But then I'm on all social channels, social, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. The podcast is the first episode will probably be released in about 2 weeks. So I'm actually filming a couple more episodes before we release the first one, but we're editing the first episode right now, and I'm really excited about it. So
that's awesome. So let's wrap up on this, Chad. For all the people who are listening, they kind of hear your story. You exited a business. They're in a similar position where they want to make a change in their life. They realize that it's time to go to that next chapter. What advice do you have to them about getting clear on what they want and actually taking action towards making that a part of their life?
I think it starts with you adopting a different mindset. I think wherever you have found yourself or find yourself, the mindset that you had is what got you to that point. Once you accept kind of the responsibility of entrepreneurship, it doesn't really matter whose fault it is anymore. It's always your responsibility to get it right and to fix it and make it go in the direction that you want it to go in. So having that type of mindset is what I try to preach to people is if you can adopt that type of mindset where even if someone else is at fault, even if there's COVID outside, there's no excuse for not making progress on your goals, and chip away at it day after day in, day out. It's going to be really hard for anything to stop you.
Well, Chad, thanks so much for being on, and thank you for all you listeners for joining for another show. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to watch another, here's one up top. And here's another great video right down below.